Bill?
I did.
Okay.
Render Crayton, interview, take 2.
So you were saying you're reading an interesting book right now?
Yeah, it's about the time between the World War II and Dien Bien Phu and all the machinations that the French and the Americans went through about, helping each other. And it's just really sad when you realize how screwed up all that was.
For the younger kids, define what Dien Bien Phu was to the French.
And it's really disappointing.
As what Bill was saying, so that the younger people who might not know about Dien Bien Phu, I'm not pronouncing it correctly, can you describe what that was?
Oh, it was a valley in northwest Hanoi in northwest Vietnam that the French decided to pool most of their troops there, and they wanted to fight a decisive battle against Bo and Jap. But they did not realize how mobile the Vietnamese were and how much supplies and guns and so forth that they could travel to this, that they could take this one place. And there were hills on both sides of it. And so they went up into the hills with these cannons, these howitzers and mortars that they had, and they just rained down on this thing, and they took out the airfield in the first few days, and it was just a massacre. I mean, the French killed thousands of Vietnamese soldiers, but in turn, the Vietnamese killed thousands of the French soldiers. And the only way they could be reinforced, the French could be reinforced, was by airdrops, because they destroyed the airfield early on. And the French kept asking the U.S. for help, and we did. We gave them some airplanes. They wanted us to send ground troops over there. But I don't know why. I'm trying to think now whether or not our leaders ever looked back on that period and said, there's no way the U.S. needs to get into a war with Vietnam, because it's a no-win situation. I mean, the Viet Minh had the hearts and minds of the people. They knew the territory. They could move things around with ease. And I don't know. I can't remember why we wanted to fight so badly, because we should have known that we couldn't win. I mean, you read these books and you could see the fallacy of us going in there. And then there was another book by Bernard Fall called, oh Lord, I can't remember the name of it now, but he was a famous French historian who wrote about that period as well.
So you speak about so many important things: leadership, about communication. about being military men and understanding that. And one of the things that was at the core of all of you that I've seen again and again is that you had this code. What is that? What is the code that you shared there?
Well, it's just that you're a group and everybody's looking out for each other, and you're all going toward a common goal, and you're fighting to go to this to make it to this goal. And our goal was, as you probably know, was to return with honor. And so we had a purpose. So that kind of glued us all together to have this singular purpose, to return with honor. We did not want to come home with our heads bowed. We didn't know what to expect when we came home. I mean, some people thought we were going to be put in jail when we came home, that we had violated the code of conduct and so forth, and we just didn't know. And it turned out everything was fine, but we weren't sure. But we were bound and determined that we were going to come out and return with honor.
Do you remember the first time that was kind of codified in the camps? I believe CAG was the one who was the architect of that phrase.
I don't remember exactly when it was. It was toward the end, though. It was, we didn't have that at first, and so I'm sorry we didn't. We should have. It would have probably helped a little bit, but.
And what did it mean to you personally to have those three words to kind of frame your experience in?
Well, I just wanted to make sure that I did just that I could return with honor. I didn't want to do anything that would dishonor myself. And, some of the people took early release, which was against the code of conduct. So, I was bound and determined I was not going to do that. And I was not in good health, but if they'd told me that they were going to send the sick and wounded home, I wasn't going to go until everybody went. So it was just this thing that we had, that no early release. But that's about all I can tell you. I don't know.
And those words, from what you're saying, really informed you in the latter part of your stay there. They informed you as a group, whether you had codified them or not by then.
Yeah.
What is the importance of having a code of honor, sir?
A code of conduct?
A code of honor.
Code of honor. Well, you would hope that everybody would follow this code of honor, and that you were not alone in this, and that everybody was on the same page, working toward the same end, and showing the enemy that you were not going to succumb to their torture and their treatment of you. And to let them know that you were still fighting a battle. I mean, we felt like that we were still fighting a war. We were in jail. We couldn't get out. We couldn't shoot anybody. We couldn't take an active part in the war as you would think it was, but we were, hoping that we were doing our part by at least tying down. We were tying down, a group of guards, tying down some of their manpower, and so we felt like at least we were doing something to help with the war effort.
And if you think about yourself as a young man, or if you had a chance to, because this will be viewed by young men and women from the Naval Academy and other services, hopefully. What would you say to a young person today who is hoping to be a leader, to be an officer, about the importance of having a code of honor in their lives?
Well, if you don't have a code of honor, you're not going to be a leader. You need to I don't quite know how to put it, but you need some code that you can call upon when the stakes are down. And when you're down to, just barely breathing, and that you can still call on this code that you have, your own internal code, to buck up and live through this thing. You just can't give up. You need to fight all the way and to maintain your honor. And I don't know exactly how to define the term honor, except it's, to me, it means to do what makes you proud on the inside. And if you don't have that, you're not going to be a good leader.
Beautiful, sir. Beautiful. One of the aspects, let's talk for a moment about forgiveness. Both forgiveness for others who can't perhaps be as strong as you might want them to be, but more importantly, every former POW talks about the experience of self-forgiveness, about feeling that they had failed in some way, not wanting to go on. Actually, I think it was a story that Orson tells, and I'm going to find out when I get up there. Early on, maybe you were part of this, I don't know. But I believe that Orson was talking with a couple of other POWs under the door, and they were pretty confused about what was gonna happen, where they're gonna go, and CAG had been dragged into a cell down the hall. And Orson and the other junior ranking came to the conclusion that they didn't know the answer, and Orson said, well, I'll ask the old man. And he called down and somehow got to Stockdale, who had been beaten severely and was lying on the floor of a cell, and basically called out to him and said, we need your help, we need your guidance, we need your leadership. And CAG sort of steeled himself and gave some orders and some thoughts. And then years later at Unity, Orson went up to CAG and said, I want to thank you, sir. You saved my life that night. I was really ready to give up. And what's interesting is CAG's response was, well, what you didn't know was you saved my life that night. I had been beaten so severely. I was in such despair. I would lay on that floor and I just wanted to give up. And when you called out and I knew I was needed, I knew I had to keep going. So heroes don't arrive just being heroes. There's a journey there, a journey of successes and failures. And I'm sure you experienced times in the Hanoi prison systems when you wanted to give up. And to this day, you're still actively forgiving yourself for the things that you felt were not superhuman. But for these young leaders of tomorrow, speak, if you can, about forgiveness, about that quality in becoming a good leader.
Well, you have to, if you do something that you think you shouldn't do, like write letters for the Vietnamese, you've just got to, I know you're going to be concerned about that. You're going to beat yourself up about it. But you need to just realize that you're still a soldier. You still need to fight. And you need to go back the next day and do the same thing over again. You can't give up. You can't let them get the best of you. You have to fight them until you can't fight anymore. Go back, lick your wounds, and then get back in the fight again. It's just as simple as that. And I think that's what CAG wanted us to do. And he passed that on down to all of us. And it certainly shows his leadership ability that he came up with that.
Beautiful, sir. Beautiful.
Do you have any easy questions?
I am so sorry, but this is I'm so excited because the ways that you answer are just, I can't even tell you, are so, I mean, trust me, I have interviewed, 12 to 15 so far, and you're really special.
Well, I don't trust you, and I don't believe you, so.
It's true.
And who's that sniping from the back?
Were you, did you know Ev Alvarez there when you were in?
You know, I did not. I was never in the cell with Ed.
He's a good guy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he is. Poor guy. I don't know how he did it.
Yeah.
being there for 2 years all by himself, not knowing what was going on. At least we knew that there was a war going on and that someday it might be over. But I don't think after the Gulf of Tonkin thing, things just kind of quieted down. And so he didn't have this hope that the war would be over because he didn't know a war was going on. So that must have been really hard on him.
Let's talk about, let's see, we're talking about Ev.
Well, let's talk about something easy. Come on.
I'm sorry, I don't have any easy subjects. When I brought up Ev, I sort of got distracted for a moment of the things that I had something in mind that I wanted to ask you. I'm just trying to recall it as well. Okay, so in today's world, you see young people, I go into restaurants and I see couples on dates and all of them are on their phones, they're not talking, they're on Facebook, and we have this deluge of data going on daily, traffic and noise and all these other things. You were put into solitary for, I believe, 3 years, sir, is that correct?
Yes.
What do you learn about yourself? What do you find out in an experience like that?
Well, you find out all the good points about you and all the bad points. And you go back and you look and, I went back as far as I could think, and just kind of live my life over again. And I thought many times about the bad things I had done, and I'm not going to discuss them here, but I did some bad things, and then I did some good things. And so I would kind of weigh those against each other and try to decide what kind of man I wanted to be when I got out of there, and what I wanted to do when I got out. And so it gave, you can't imagine when you don't have any of those distractions, when you don't have anybody fingering on a cell phone, texting, and you don't have the music blaring and stuff like that, and it's just quiet, and it's just you and the mosquitoes and the roaches and the rats in the cell with you. And you can't imagine what you can remember. I mean, it's back there somewhere. But we have so many distractions that if you ask me what I did day before yesterday, I probably couldn't tell you because I've got all these other things going on in my head. But if you put me in a room for 2 weeks with nothing else, just me and the four walls, then I could probably tell you, because you have this stuff in your head, you just can't bring it up because there's too much noise out there. But I don't know. I came home and I would ask people about certain instances that happened that, between myself and them. And they'd look at me like I was crazy, like, how the hell do you remember that? I said, I don't remember that. And, I'd go home, I'd talk to my wife and say, well, you know so-and-so, you remember her, don't you? And, no, I don't remember her. I said, how do you remember her? And it was just the fact that there was nothing else to think about. So you could just dredge all this stuff up. And unfortunately, the bad came up with the good. And, I'd go back and I went through my college courses, I figured out equations and all kinds of stuff that I could have never done if I had not been in solitary. Not that I wanted to be in solitary, but it did give me a good respite from all the noise around me. And even in the prison camp, there was noise around you because you were always doing something or tapping on the walls. I mean, we spent, I would say we spent 80% of our time trying to figure out how to communicate. That was the thing. That was the thing that we most tried to do, was to do different methods of tapping on the walls. And I mean, we did all kinds of stuff. I mean, you would see guys, you could look under the door and see the other door, and somebody would be there with their hands and they were flashing the tap code with their hand. And you'd take a blanket, wrap it up like a donut, put it up against the wall and speak into it, and the guy on the other side would put his tin cup near the spot where you were talking, and you could talk through those walls, even though they were really thick walls, but you could hear. But that was kind of a dangerous method of communicating, because the guy that's standing there with his head in this blanket and the guard comes along, there wasn't much you could, wasn't much of an excuse you could use. He knew exactly what you were doing. But I always thought the funny part about the tap code was the fact that the Vietnamese would try to trap you with it, and they would give you the signal. They would try to emulate that, and they just couldn't do it. It didn't come out right. They did not have the rhythm for shaving a haircut. And so you knew when it was them tapping on the wall trying to get you to reply to them so they could catch you in the act. So I always thought that was pretty funny. And I always thought it was funny also because I think to some guys standing on the outside of some of those buildings in some of the camps, you would think that somebody had let out a whole bunch of woodpeckers, because you could just hear this tapping all going down, up and down these walls, and it was like woodpeckers pecking on the side of the building. But they knew what we were doing, but they just couldn't catch us in the act.
Could you do the shaving a haircut one more time for me?
Whoops.
Would you mind moving the water bottle away further? Oh, yeah, there you go. I don't see it. Go ahead.
All right.
Thank you. Let me make sure
Well-
I'm focusing on. Okay, start with your hand in your lap and then move your hand up. No, start with your hand in your lap and then move your hand. Okay, go ahead.
And then the answer would come back.
Okay, great.
Let's talk about room 7 and Christmas.
Okay. I'm assuming you're talking about the big room that we were all in.
My understanding is that CAG had twice requested from the Vietnamese that you hold a Christmas ceremony, religious Christmas ceremony,
Right.
and then they refused and you held it anyway, and then what ensued? So tell the story, please, sir, because you were there.
Well, we were in this large room and we wanted to have a Christmas ceremony, and CAG had said something to the Vietnamese and they said, no way. So anyway, Christmas Eve, we all stood up and started singing Silent Night, and of course the Vietnamese got all upset with that because they just assumed that we were going to riot. So they came in and hauled a bunch of people out, hauled Stockdale out. And that was kind of the end of it. I mean, we just never had a chance to get anything like it going.
What I remember is that someone started to sing God Bless America.
Oh, yeah. Well, that was... It did that. We started singing Silent Night, God Bless America. And then some of the other rooms in the other camp, in the same camp, picked up on that, and they started singing it too. And so that really shook the Vietnamese up. And so they just hauled the leaders out and put them in a camp by themselves. And pretty soon they just disbanded that room 7 and moved us all to smaller rooms. They
What did
decided.
it feel like that night when you heard those songs? It was Christmas Eve.
Well, it was pretty sad, but because that was always the saddest day of the year around there when you think about it. But you know, it was nice to know that we could get together and to do something like that. That we were willing, everybody was willing to stick their neck out and sing God Bless America, sing Silent Night, and just let the Vietnamese know that, you know, we still had our spirit and that we were not their willing slaves that they would like us to be.
And what time of night was it? Was it late or was it?
No, I don't remember. It was probably 9 o'clock at night.
And it was chilly, right?
Yeah.
Hanoi could get quite cold.
Oh, Hanoi got really cold. Yeah, I think I spent some of the coldest nights of my life in Hanoi because all you had was a really thin blanket, and just these long pajamas, and you were sleeping on a concrete slab that was freezing to start off with. And I remember one winter, I was living with two guys, and I mean, we spent a month or so just bundled up in this thing, you know, just all wrapped up in your blanket because you couldn't do much of anything else. It was just so cold. And I never thought of Vietnam as being cold, but it was cold and damp. And I think that was part of the problem. It was just damp, cold.
And as you started to hear other voices and other cells start to pick up that song, what happened? What did it encourage everybody? Was it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It made you really happy that they were willing to do that. Didn't last long. So, you know, I don't remember that much about it, except I know that it was just an exciting period of time.
I've asked a number of people who were there that night to help us out with something, and I'm hoping you're going to be willing, and I'm going to preamble this by saying I'm going to ask if you would be willing to sing a little bit of God Bless America.
No.
It's there's nothing to be professional. It's just that I'm going to edit together your various voices and then put in sort of the Navy choir at the end singing it. So I have the words here if you don't know them, sir. Would you be willing to sing a little bit?
Oh, I know the words to this. I thought maybe you were giving me the rest of the verses.
Okay.
Okay. Here we go. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam, God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam, God bless America, my home, sweet home. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam, God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home. And that'll go down in posterity.
Beautiful, sir.
Jesus.
That was fantastic.
I got
You're
it.
a champ. You are a true champ.
True. I'm a real singer. This is getting harder.
There's no singing and dancing left.
Huh?
You did that, yeah.
It's getting harder and harder.
Well, I spring that on you toward the end just because it figures it's.
I hope it's toward the end.
Yeah, absolutely. It's getting on in that time. So, so we did the. Oh, I wanted to ask were you part of the Hanoi March?
Yes, I was.
Can you describe that event, sir? Because it's such a powerful story.
Well, They came in one night and they took us all out, put us in trucks, and took us somewhere, I don't know where, somewhere in downtown Hanoi. And there are some guys who have found out exactly where that march was, and I just have never seen it. But they had us march, they lined us up 2 by 2, and we're handcuffed to each other, and they marched us down the street, and they must have, I don't know, there were thousands of people lining the street, and they were hitting us. They had guards on both sides to keep the crowds back, but there were too few guards and too many spectators. And they took out their frustrations on us that night. The Vietnamese did. And they kicked us and hit us in the face. They threw rocks at us. We were pretty beat up. And we thought they finally, at the end of this march, they veered off to the left and put us into a soccer stadium. And I don't know, most of us thought they were going to come in and kill us then in this stadium. We thought we were goners, because Ho Chi Minh had said that he was going to kill the prisoners. And so we thought that was the time they were going to do it. But we sat there for a long time, and they came and put us back in our cells. And,
who were you next to on the march?
Al Brunstrom.
And describe, if you could, a little bit about, as that march began and the rains and blows and rocks and things, like, I'm sure you feared for your life, and you were, I'm assuming all of you were supporting each other trying to get through.
Yep, everybody was, if somebody would stumble, the other guy would try to pick them up, and but yeah, they were pretty brutal. I mean, they would kick you, and they'd kick you in the groin, and they'd come at you and slap you in the face, and then they'd throw these rocks at you, which was the thing that hurt the most. And it was just a long, perilous journey. It's like one of these things you go to and summer camp where you line up and you have to run through the gauntlet to prove yourself, and that's exactly what we were doing. But it was a scary time, and we didn't know what was going to happen at the end of it. That was the thing.
Did you also, notice the panic in the guards? It sounds like they also realized it was out of control.
Yeah, they were a little bit panicky themselves, and but they didn't they were just, raw recruits, so they didn't know what to do. So they just kind of walked along and tried to keep the people back, but they didn't do anything to them. They didn't hit them with their rifle butts or anything like that.
As you, my understanding is that event, the Hanoi March, actually precipitated a turning point in your treatment, because that was broadcast to the world, and it was an embarrassment to the Vietnamese. Their original intent in doing it was proudly displaying you as prisoners, but instead
It backfired on
it
them.
backfired on them.
Yeah.
When did you become aware of that, and did you start to see some changes then?
Well, not right away, but after Ho Chi Minh died, the treatment picked up to some extent. They stopped most of the interrogations. I don't remember the food getting much better. It never did. But the harassment, the interrogations, and those pretty much came to a halt. And so one of the things that you were always afraid of was you're in a cell block and excuse me, you would hear the keys jangling in the night, and you'd say, "Oh hell, who are they coming for now?" And they'd go to somebody else's door, and you'd say, "Whew, boy, I'm glad that wasn't me." But most of that kind of stuff stopped after Ho Chi Minh died and after the march. And, you know, I attribute a lot of that to public opinion in the United States. And I just finished reading a book about the League of American Families, which you might find interesting. I found it interesting because my ex-wife was in there, but it's a book that actually told Sybil Stockdale's story about founding this League of American Families and about all the things those gals went through. And I mean, you can't believe what they did and what they accomplished. It's just amazing. I mean, they were not afraid. They'd go up to congressmen's doors and bang on their doors and demand to see them, and they'd send telegrams to Nixon and to Johnson, and they'd go to Paris to the Vietnamese embassy, and they'd start these letter writing campaigns and deliver thousands of letters to the Vietnamese. And I think the Vietnamese got the picture that the American public was not on their side. The Vietnamese always thought that there was a cadre of Americans who were against the war. And, you know, they'd see those anti-war demonstrations and they'd think that they had the country where they wanted them. But yet that was not true. The American people turned to, and his wives had a lot to do with that. But when the Americans finally found out what the treatment was really like, and the Department of Defense and the State Department had always just squelched all of that. They did not want any of that to get out. And I don't know. I've never figured it out. But I don't know what they were trying to do, but they were really hurting us because they were not getting the word out that we were being tortured. In fact, the first they ever really heard about it was when Denton tapped out the Morse code with his eyelashes and said torture. So
We had the great pleasure to meet and speak with Dorothy McDaniels, Dot McDaniels, who was one of the women
Yeah.
involved in the league, Louise Mulligan, Alice Stratton. And, you know, those women are forces of nature, definitely. And it was
don't want to mess with them.
no. you become aware of the efforts of, like the bracelets, things like that? Was that all when you returned?
No. When new guys would get shot down, we would pump them for every bit of news we could, you know. Who won the Super Bowl, who did this, who did that, what's going on with the anti-war movement. And they told us about the bracelets and what a hit they had been. And so we found out from them.
And did you think about, wow, there's people out there wearing a bracelet with my name on it? Did that?
Well, it gave me a little boost. I wasn't sure that I had one with my name on it, but I just assumed so.
And if you could say that, because we won't hear my voice, just so that the audience understands what you're talking about, that when you found out that there were people in America who might be wearing a bracelet with your name on it, if you could say that part of it so that we understand what you're referring to.
Well, I was, just happy to know that somebody out there in the United States was wearing a bracelet that had my name on it, and that they were wearing it every day, and they probably looked at it, and they probably said a prayer for me. I didn't know what they were doing with them, but at least my name was there, and somebody knew that I was there, and they cared enough about us to wear those bracelets.
Beautiful. I'm getting near the end of what I've had to ask. Excuse me, and I'm glad I'm saving this cough to the end. Is there something that I might not have touched on that you might feel is something you would be important to talk about, or?
I don't know. I think one thing that's interesting is what happened when they finally let us out.
Hold on one second. Hold that thought, sir. The air conditioning just came on. I need to shut it down so it doesn't interrupt what you're saying.
And apparently the cough medicine is wearing off as well.
Boy.
Double dose of cough medicine.
Brenda, is that Heath Lee's book that you read?
I'm sorry?
Heath Lee's book that just came out in April, is that the one that you just read? I want to get that one. I'll talk to you after.
It just came out.
It just came out, yeah.
Yeah.
I want to get that one. I'll talk to
Yeah, you
after.
should read that. It's really interesting. I didn't think I'd like it, but I finished it in 2 days, so.
While we wait for the air conditioner to stop, Louise was telling us about going into the Pentagon, a room full of an oval table full of top brass, admirals, everyone, and they did to her what they'd been doing all along. Well, you should just, and she finally had it, and she stood up and pounded her hand on the table, and she said everything jumped on the table, all these guys, all these men, like, whoa, and she said, listen, every one of you, strip those epaulets off your chest, take those hats off and get rid of your ranks, because none of you are listening to me, and I want to be heard, and they were like, and apparently Jim Mulligan at Nixon's, the dinner,
Yeah.
Kissinger came up to Mulligan and Jim Mulligan and said, your wife, she's a pain in the ass. Yeah, I think the story, and it sounds like your ex-wife was involved as well.
Yes.
There it is. Just shut off. Okay, so you were just saying that what's interesting is when you
Well, when they finally they took us all out in the courtyard, and we'd never all been all together again. And they lined us up. We were all in these ranks, and they read this part of the peace agreement that said that we would all be released in 14 days. And I don't know what they expected. I think they expected us to just jump for joy and scream, and nobody cracked a smile. We just stood there, stoic, just to show them that, you know, we didn't really care, that we could take it. And so anyway, they put us back in these cells, and then a few days later they came out in buses and took us out to Jalam Airport, put us in a hangar, and kept us there for hours. And we were just sitting there, and you know, everybody was thinking, "Oh my God, they've changed their mind. We're going to go back." But I think one of the grandest sights, even though I live in the Grand Canyon state, the grandest sight that I ever saw was this C-141 sitting out on the tarmac out there with this big American flag on the tail. And that was the greatest sight I think I've ever seen. And so we all got on this airplane. This thing started taxiing out, and as soon as we took off, the pilot said he could hardly control that airplane because everybody, as soon as the wheels got off the ground, everybody jumped up and started hugging the nurses that were on there and hand slapping and everything. And then when we got to, he called out feet wet, which meant that we were over the South China Seas, and the same thing went on again. I mean, he said it was hard to fly that airplane.
Wow, that's a beautiful story, and I never heard it said that way. That you all just implicitly unified in being silent when they announced your release, but
Yeah.
that call of joy waited until you were basically on American soil.
That's right.
In that plane. And that
Yeah, we didn't. We did not want them to know that we were happy with them. I mean, I think they thought, "Oh boy, these guys are gonna really think we're great guys. You know, we're letting them go," and we weren't going to do that.
You were defiant till the very end.
Right.
Well, I just am stunned by the interview you just gave, sir. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for all your service.
I'm stunned by it too, about how stupid it is. Jesus.
We have to do a little tap code demo.
Yeah, we're gonna do a little
I'll show
demo
you
of
how
the
to
tap
do it.
code. Hold on one second, Kara. I'm just reviewing in my head.
Oh, okay. I thought you were done.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, one last question. You referenced it, you live in the Grand Canyon state. You live in Phoenix. You go out your door, and where you live, you see these mountains and this. When you take a walk, when you look at the desert wildflowers, does freedom have a special meaning for you, sir? Can you talk about the environment you live in and what it means to be an American for you?
Oh yeah. You know, I just can't believe it. I live in a country where I'm free. And you read about these other countries where these dictators or being killed and killing their people and things. And I think to myself that we're just so lucky, and we don't realize it. Most people don't realize how lucky they are. I mean, you know, even free people in free countries like Britain, I don't think they don't have the same amount of freedom that we do here. And it's just so glad that this is where I live. I don't think I'd live any other place. A lot of people say, well, I'm going to go to Australia to live because they have this or they have that. We have everything here. There's nothing in this country that we don't lack. I mean, we have scenery that most people will never see. And, you know, we have oceans, we've got mountains, we've got just about everything.
And you speak about those oceans and those mountains. You have a flag, a POW flag, that stands for your group and your experience, and it often flies with the American flag. Does the flag have particular significance for you as a?
Oh yeah, it makes me really proud when I see that thing flying. It makes me think, but people still, you know, they're still missing in action out there. And I'm just hoping we never forget them. And I'm hoping that this flag will trigger people to think the same thing, that we're not going to forget them. I don't know that there are any POWs left, but there's certainly a lot of MIAs and from different wars, and not only the Vietnam War. But I read somewhere what the figures from Korea, and something like 1,800 guys still missing from Korea. And that's amazing to me.
Beautiful. So should we go ahead and cut, and we'll set up for the topic? Let me
Turn the sound off.
render it.